The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines.
Okay, how I came to my faith walk is when I was younger, I went to church with my grandmother every now and then. She told me about God and who he was and what he does. As I grew, went to college and things of that nature, I always straddled the fence. Didn't know what that term meant then. I was good enough to think I was being good, but bad enough to not be committed and to Christ. So I always listened to worship music. I had my favorite artists, but I was not committed to Christ. And I thought I was, like I said, I was the good girl, but I was not committed. So, and I didn't have the foundation that I needed to have as far as what my life was supposed to be in Christ. Didn't have my identity, didn't really know who I was, things of that nature, that everything that I was missing, but I didn't know I was missing it because I was quote unquote good girl. So fast forward, got married. After my first child we had, God put the squeeze on me. And one of my aunts was ministering to me, and it's like, you're doing everything but being committed. So I went to a neighbor's house and I was distraught about some things that were going on in my life. And she said the same thing. She said, you're doing everything and you're not committed. You still need Christ. So the next day I went to church with her and gave my life to Christ that day. And it was such a awesome turnaround. I remember the first day, I remember when I got baptized, I literally felt a weight lifted off of me at my baptism. I will never forget it, never forget where I was, never forget how it felt. I was in awe and I was dumbfounded. I couldn't even talk for a while. I remember sitting in the car driving my husband home and I couldn't even talk. So I just when I was committed, I was committed. Once I committed my life to Christ, I did what he said. I took everything literal through the word of God. Everything was literal to me. And from then on, just grew with him, found out who I was, how much he loved me, why he called me his daughter, things of that nature. So that's my faith walk.
Welcome back to the Ministry of Misfits podcast. Welcome back to A Call of a Mentor. We are back with another co-op episode here, or episodes, depending on which platform you're listening to. Again, if you're listening to A Call of a Mentor, this would be episode number 3 with me and the McDowells. If you're listening to Ministry of Misfits, this is episode number 2 with the McDowells. So last time we talked, we were in Angela's wheelhouse, Angela's field house, talking the difference between therapy and mentorship and coaching. This week we're going to the other coach, and we're going into Dwight's wheelhouse, a little bit more of my wheelhouse also, and we're going to talk about community engagement and really the impact that a local ministry can have, whether that's sports rec and fitness, whether that's outreach, whether that's youth, whether that's just gospel-driven ministry, the local impact that it can have and what the result of that can be. So, Dwight, Angela, you guys are in, let's see if I remember, you guys are in Norfolk, right? Mm-hmm. Norfolk, Virginia. You guys have been there for over 20 years. Give us a little bit of insight, though. What was the neighborhood you guys were in? What was it like when you guys first got there?
Now, Andrew, if you're asking us a question like that, hey, we got to tell you the whole deal. How it is. We don't sugarcoat this.
Don't sugarcoat anything. I mean, if anybody that has been listening to either one of our podcasts knows, neither one of us sugarcoat anything, and we just give it to you straight. But then we back it up with the Bible, so you can't be mad at us. So,
well, I'm glad you used that one because I'm going to start off with Nehemiah as repairing the breaches and repairing the city. But honestly, when my wife has always been from this area. I came here through the military, and we met.
Shout it out. You were Navy, correct?
I was. I am a Navy veteran. Served in Desert Storm and a couple other wars. But when I came here, this area where we live and that we've been growing up in marriage through was like when I would first come off my ship and they told us, they said they let us know that we weren't allowed in certain areas of this area. This where we live is what's called Ocean View, meaning don't go down there. They also let us know that there were signs that sailors beware, stuff like that. Now, and so in this area where we actually took up camp is what we call Ocean View. And in that time in the mid 90s, when we came here, it was prostitute inhibited, it was drugs, it was, and I'm not talking about like the, oh yeah, we got drugs, we had it so bad, it was infested, like bugs somewhere, and that type thing, and it's so bad so that when I came in coaching, there was so many kids and so many different apartment complexes and torn down apartments, and that I would coach, or at that time I was the assistant water boy coach. I always tell people I was the assistant to the assistant to the assistant water boy coach. I just wanted to be a part, and so I'd sit there and then I'd watch, and then but it got so bad at some point with the drug dealers would come up and be wanting their kids back. So when I say their kids, that they were trying to get them to sell drugs and stuff like that as well. We also we had to stop if it were winter time and fall, we had to stop coaching football and practicing by 5:20, because if it got dark, it turned into a whole nother neighborhood of just the worst of the worst. And so that incoming year that I was there, by that fall, by spring, the person that was in charge then says, you know what, I'm out. He just disappeared. We didn't see him again. And then they came up to me and asked me about, why don't you just stay here and start working with the youth? And I thought, hey, I'm a young guy, 26 years later now, but at that time, and I'm just, I wanted to do something big for the Lord. So, and I thought, wait a minute. And so I went home all excited to tell my wife about it. And my wife didn't follow me here for the next 3 years. Literally, she just said, man, do you understand where you're talking about coaching and stuff in that neighborhood? And she knew more about it than me because she'd been here all her life in the city. So she didn't go there.
Now that's something I think we may want to start breaking down first of all. And this is something that, Angela, we're going to turn to you both as the local and as the fact that you are the marriage expert here. You as a local person know this neighborhood, know what goes on in this neighborhood, and your, war veteran husband comes home all excited about the fact that that's where we're moving the family. What is the actual thought process here? Because this is something that is going to be relevant throughout most of the ministry world. Is God lays the call for a neighborhood on one spouse's heart, and the other spouse is either not hearing or has not heard yet about that. What do we do with all of this?
Because we lived where we lived at that time, it was maybe 15, 20 miles from the actual area that he's talking about. And when he went in to coach, he told me about it, he was excited about it. I let him go coach. He moved himself into that neighborhood. And we did not, at the time we had 2 kids, we did not move. But the thing about the marriage part is I didn't hold him back from going.
He did not.
Because I knew that it was something that I didn't hear God telling me to do it, but I knew he was so passionate about it that it was something that God had given him. So I had to release him to go and do that. But he didn't drag me with him. So it was a give and take, kind of ebb and flow that we did until God says, okay, now it's time for you to go over there with him and coach with him. And when that time came, it was a little while later, at least 3 or 4 years later, that's when I did it.
Actually, I think so more like 6 years.
Maybe 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, 4 to 6 years, somewhere around there.
Now that actually brings into what the next question with that was. Now, because you just laid out a very grim picture of the neighborhood when you first got there. 4 to 6 years later, what are we talking? Is this the same exact neighborhood? Is there improvement? Is there decline? What do we got in those 4 to 6 years?
Well, there was a little bit of improvement. My husband can speak to that a whole lot more. There was a little bit of improvement. And, so we didn't have to leave at dark. This time, we didn't have any lights on our field for our kids to continue practicing. So what the parents did, every parent pulled up to the gate and everybody turned on their high beam so our kids could have lights in order to practice.
Right.
So as a community, we still came together to do what we needed to do for our youth. And so the improvement was coming. It was coming slowly but surely, as my grandmother used to say.
And I think it's important right there what she said, the parents, because see that first 3 years, I didn't have parental support. But notice when my wife, see, because she would still, when I understand that award ceremonies and stuff happened, and we would do dinners or whatever could get family members out. And I'd go door to door to get, I wanted the parents, period. And so when she came, like full swing, she would start seeing things like the parents there turning on. She noticed that stuff. Like I had totally forgotten that I didn't have them turn the lights on then because I didn't have parents to turn the lights on. When my wife, she said, "Oh," I said, "Hey, turn your lights on." She was all for that. And that's how she saw. So it's important to realize that.
Yeah, Dwight, because I've heard your guys' story and what you guys even do, and that prayer is really the main ministry point that you guys do within the sports ministry, is that you start and end with prayer, and you teach the kids why we pray and how we pray, and prayer really is the tool that you guys use to get them interested in what's going on with the discipleship side of it. Was this something that already you had started implementing as far as the ministry side, or were you still really looking at this more of I am here as a Christian, but I am here as an athletic coach that just happens to be Christian in this neighborhood? What was the approach?
Yeah. The second way, I didn't see when I came in. First of all, some of y'all may have been on the other episode, is I had just come to the Lord, literally. At that time, 26 years ago, I literally had just come green out, and it just happened to be right there at football, and those things all happened within a 3-month time frame where it would be kind of, I inherited it because I was still saying to God, "Hey, I'm ready for a mission," because I was just gung ho. That some of you've been through that place when the Lord comes into your life and takes over. You just want to you talk about him all the time. You tell everybody about him, and that's what I was doing. And somebody was saying, and I mixed this with and coach football, but so I didn't. My heart was praying and saying that, but some 3 or 4 years down the road, my spirit was crying out in prayer because I didn't know nowhere else to go because it was getting so bad, and it was and we didn't have money at all to do anything that we when we had to really struggle as it wasn't even an organization then, it was those things. So I don't want to sound so holier than thou. We came in just prayer warriors. We didn't. I had just given my life to Christ. He was showing me how to walk. My wife was still like, I'm learning what a vision is, and she's thinking, "Dude, how'd you get a vision that fast?" But
it was coach football.
All I did was coach football. And you got a vision for what? And so, but the thing is, some of us we hang out with the enemy so much and so hard in our life that when we finally come to Christ, it looks like it was right then that God has moved, but he was waiting for me all those years that I was even part of corrupting that neighborhood, if the truth be told. And meaning I was hanging out there on the streets. When I come home from the Navy, I'd go hang out there and drink and smoke and all those things out there in the neighborhood. And somewhere along the line, the Spirit of the Lord shook me into place and said, "This place that you're tearing down, I have need of you to bring this up. I'm going to use you to bring this up." And I have, in my personal life, I have a personal relative that's almost looks identical to me that was living that life continually when God started using me to help build that neighborhood up. So by night, he was tearing it up. And by day, I was trying to build it up. And my wife could probably speak into that more. And so we get there that when we finally get to the place, I'm in my wife's lap. in tears by this time because it's now gunshots was routine. And prostitutes walking through and windows being broke. This is routine. I'm in her lap. I need y'all to because I'm hoping this is gonna help somebody that's starting out in this kind of ministry. Everybody don't have the kind you walk right out of the church and into the community and everybody receive you. Some we have to start. And I'm in tears to my wife by now. That dream and that excitement were dwindling away over 3 years now, 4 years. And when I'm in her lap screaming prayer, she begins to pray and intercede. And that's where we start to blossom.
And this is really where I was wanting to get to, what at least for this first segment is, Greg has talked about, I don't know if we talked about here with the Ministry of Misfits, but Greg talks about a lot within the CSRM podcast stuff. And the one that Dan Stouffer and I helped Greg walk through his book, Fundamentals of Sports Outreach, is that this, the platform, or not platform, the kind of timeline for evangelistic disciple making is a 4 to 7 year period.
Come on. Yes, sir.
And, it starts out something simple and just keeps going. And what we just heard is a perfect example of the fact that, you received this vision within a few months of accepting Christ. You went from looking at serving prison time to now you are, kind of thrown into by default head coach of a local football team in the worst neighborhood in the area. Within about a month's time, you've only been a Christian for this short amount of time, but you already know God's doing something, but you don't know what it looks like. Your wife is not necessarily on board, but she's not stopping you.
And she's pregnant.
And you go, which I will say the one thing that I have heard more than anything else about ministries when they're about to start, especially inner city ministry, because most of my ministry experience has been in an inner city sector. Also, that's part of why you and I get along so well.
Makes sense.
Is most of the time when the ministry is getting ready to start, the wife is pregnant and there's no money, and now all of a sudden God's saying, "Oh yeah, and you're going to go start a ministry in an area with no money."
Yeah. And give the little bit of money I was making in the ministry.
Right. That's just the way that seems to be the pattern that God keeps doing. Because I believe these are all going to be airing for Ministry Misfits folks. This is very similar to what we heard when we interviewed the Hunkas, of what Dwight was feeling there from, pretty much from the moment he accepted Christ, was this holy discontent for what was going on in this neighborhood. And he could not do anything but try to make it better. He didn't know what it looked like. He's got family that is part of the problem. He's got, all these different things. And for 4 years, he goes and he struggles and struggles and struggles. But by year 5 or 6, it's improved enough that now all of a sudden the community has taken notice, and now they're turning their lights on so that he can continue doing what he's doing.
Come on, man. Was you there? Because you described it just like you were there. Honestly,
well, you just described it for me 30 seconds ago. So it's pretty, my mind, my poor epileptic memory mind is good enough that I can remember things from 30 seconds ago when you described it. But we
summarize it well. You summarize it well.
This is really what we want to get into, though, is the fact that, especially those of you that are called and have this discontent for inner city missions, inner city ministry, and especially dealing with kids, 4 years is not a lot of time. It seems like it's a lot of time, but it is not a lot of time. One of the first things that my wife and I learned out of college in the first ministry spot we were in, which was exact opposite of inner city. We were in the middle of nowhere, rural Cowtown, Ohio, which ironically, our first ministry spot was also my wife's hometown, just like your guys's. But, the first thing we got there, we were helping a church rebuild their youth group that had dwindled down to 2 students left. And the first unfortunate thing that we had to realize was that there was an entire generation of kids from, freshmen in high school to seniors in high school that we pretty much just had to mark off as gone to us, because we were not going to be able to reach them and still be able to have an effective ministry. We had to start lower, in that it was going to be this 4 to 7 year process. And so this is where those of you that are listening that are senior pastors that are, you're sponsoring a missionary, you're sponsoring somebody like the McDowells, maybe you're sponsoring the McDowells, which you should be. Maybe you're looking to sponsor Minister Misfits, which you also should be. Just saying, we're not above shameless plugs. You got to understand the fact that God's timing is not always instant, but God's timing is always perfect. And so 4 years to get to the point where now the parents are turning the lights on is really not that long of a time to wait and to invest.
Come on, man. Yes, sir.
Don't give up on these especially when we're talking inner city, and especially when we're talking about dealing with attacks from the enemy that are coming in the forms of drug or sex or bullets. 4 years is not a long time to have to wait to see this sort of thing happen. I believe we are out of time for your guys' first episode. We need to take a quick break for Ministry Misfits. Call of Mentor people, we will see you in 2 weeks, unless you don't want to wait that long to hear the rest of this awesome story, in which case hop on over to Ministry Misfits and you guys can listen to the rest of it this week. Those of you Ministry Misfits that are saying, I don't have time to sit here and listen to the rest of this awesome story, even though it's so awesome, go over and wait 2 weeks and you can hear it on Call of a Mentor. You can pick up right where we're leaving off. Everybody else that's staying around, stay around, because we'll be right back after these brief messages. This episode of the Ministry Misfits podcast and this awesome shirt are brought to you by Courageous Clothing Company. Courageous Clothing Company is a Christian family-owned business that specializes in custom designs that they create, as well as bulk screen printing of your custom designs as well. When you buy from Courageous Clothing Company, you're not just buying an awesome shirt, you also are helping spread the gospel across the world through the missions that they support, such as this here with Ministry Misfits, as well as with their own designs that have Christian-themed messages, sharing the gospel in an awesome and relevant way, or as we say within CSRM and Ministry Misfits, strategically relevant evangelism. Check out their entire line at courageousclothingcompany.com. All right, welcome back to this co-op Ministry Misfits Call of a Mentor. Those of you that are listening to it on a Call of a Mentor, if you listened to the last episode, we were walking through Dwight and Angela's story. Some of you may know it because you may have lived it with them. But where we are at in their story at the moment, it's been about 4 to 6 years since Dwight started. Angela and the kids are now starting to get involved. Parents are getting involved by turning on the headlights. And we're starting to see some changes happen in the attitude of the community, not necessarily towards Dwight, but towards just the community in general. So pick up where we left off, Dwight. It's been, you've got parents turning the lights on for you now. What do you guys start looking at?
Now we're at that 4-year mark, literally, where my wife is starting to see me really stay with something. But I'm at a place like, man, if I could just get a little more, her gut and the way she does things is so precision that you can. This is how she is all the time. She's very precise on things, and I could use.
That's why she's a good therapist.
Yeah, I could use some of that. So I have 4 sisters that come along. Not my sisters; they are 4 sisters from the community, and I was coaching all of their children. They at least had, some of them had 3 children, some of them had 4, some had 1 or 2, literally. And then my wife comes at the same time. So all 5 of them, when I say come, I mean come full-fledged, where it makes some changes, where they could go coaching and my wife could govern, where and where she could govern, making sure that I wasn't taking no more attacks of how I'm doing things or why I'm not doing this or this, that, and the other. She governed that. And where those 4 could kind of coach into the community from what they've already been sending their kids to do. And we still see them today. They're not part of the ministry today, but they are part of the ministry. They still send me messages, and some of their kids come back and coach for us now. And so, so those 5 really do. God uses a major turn with them over the next year. So much so that we have this huge promotion ceremony to promote them to where God is saying put them at. And my wife has to literally, she wears the honors of those. We deal with stars and bars, what ranks you and stuff like that. And if those that get my book, Call of a Mentor, they'll see how we did that.
It's not like you were military or anything to make it worth,
I know, but it did that, and we did it just like that. And then we and as those ceremonies went on, the local one of the local pastors, who I literally tried to write a couple times, never met him, saying, "Hey, you should come check us out." Never did. At that time, their then 8-year-old son would be at one of those ceremonies that we were having as they were being promoted, which was the fourth ceremony, and how at that time I could open and close in prayer at the events. That's just it. It wasn't like a natural thing, but it was from my heart. And I remember this guy coming up to me at one of those and says, and I didn't know who he was later, but he had been at that ceremony for whatever reason. He had gotten there, and then one of his kids wanted to play in the program at 8 years old. But he began to say, "I feel like I have some reason to be here helping you." And I said, "Well, I don't see how. Ain't you the pastor down the street? I need you to understand, we don't have a lot of people saved here, know the Lord, none of that stuff." He says, "Are you kidding me? I was at one of your award ceremonies that you were having that you were promoting the mentors to master mentors, and I heard more Christ there than I heard in my own church. I heard more prayer," is what he said. And I said, "Really?" And I chuckled a little bit. He was serious. He says it did something in him to say that I need to reach out and come out of here. It was his 8-year-old son that wanted to play with us in our program. He thought he was going to take him out of the community where they were pastoring to go and play in one of the communities that couldn't say better. And he says, "No, I want to play with the kids that I go to school with every day." And so so he begins to hang out more and more. And my wife and I take him, he and I just kind of fall in love. And I need to make sure everybody understands this. In case you haven't seen, I am an African-American brother. And this was a Caucasian brother that we totally we crossed the racial barriers or anything that was like that. And then we fell in love with.
Thanks to one 8-year-old.
Thanks to one 8-year-old kid that I was coaching that wanted to be a part of the program. And I hadn't even started coaching him yet. He just kept telling us, "I want to coach there." That we began to fall in love just after conversation after conversation. That we began to introduce our wives. Now listen to me. I'm telling you, those mentors that out here, these coaches that are building from this type of ministry from scratch. If you stay in there and trust this God that I'm talking about, that can do everything, that can show you, that can lead you. He and I fell in love. Our wives met, and we fell in all. We just became so close. And then we began to, a few more months passed by, and maybe a year or so. He says, "I feel like we should become chaplains." I don't even know if there's such a thing, he said. At that time, this was back in 2001. I don't even know if there's such a thing. And we began to write job descriptions of how things would look as if we had this full-blown ministry. My wife took her rightful place, which was beside me, and some days totally in front of me, leading to show me how to be calm. She took her prayer for. We began to get people from the local church coming up to pray with people, not trying to act like they were better, just kind of standing around. And the people that was cursing and swearing so bad, when we begin to get prayer warriors in, just walking around the field, watching some of the practices, they begin to the bad guys begin to police the bad guys. Meaning, hey, we don't smoke out here anymore around our kids. Hey, we don't swear, we don't curse around them. And me and my wife, and you got to understand, you're talking now, we're in the 6th year, and you're talking to this guy that had just now, I'm 6 years saved, but I'm learning to trust the Lord in such a way, because the things that I'm starting to see now from this prostitute inhabited, full of drugs and community, broken down apartments, is now transforming, and people's calling us to say, "Hey, tell us more." And they're asking us to come and speak into other youth ministries in different communities and different states. And then my wife, we'd have to go to work full time Monday through Friday and be on a plane Friday night to go to Ohio or go to and get there and speak in large ministries. I'm like, what can we offer? But we had done things and read through the scripture. God says, now comes the fame, not fame about you, but that you can share my name and what I started doing, what I'm doing in your ministry. And then we begin to share those, and I hate to keep, but it's coming out this way. Just let me, y'all bear with me. But then
you gotta let them finish, or yeah.
Yeah.
And then it began to grow in such a way, and we would then begin to have what we call youth survival seminars and boot camps, and then we begin to incorporate prayer in the beginning of practice, in the beginning of games, at the end of games, at the end of practice, and people would begin to come up and start asking us to pray for them. They'd be asking us this. They was watching me and my wife's marriage, because now we're somewhere married. I forget at that time, probably in our 15th year or something like that. And they would be saying, "Hey, can y'all pray for us?" And most of the time we weren't even doing it but our regular life. And then we'd have other people start coming up, and when people start getting saved, and this is my last thing I'm gonna say before I shift to my wife. We hosted a cheer competition in our neighborhood in 2001, in the hood, that was being transformed by the Lord, and 600 people was there. Can you imagine closing your eyes? And my wife kept tapping me, "Hey, wake, look up there," because I kept hearing the Lord say that, "God, if you trust me, son, I'm gonna do a new thing." 6 times I heard that in the midst of this cheer competition. We were interjecting little bits of God. We'd share scripture in the cheer competition. We prayed during the competition 3 or 4 different times. And finally, when I closed my eyes to close in prayer, because the Lord said, "Do this." And I was terrified, because 90% didn't know the Lord in this place. I had me and my wife and a couple other cheerleading competition people, the judges were pastors. So I closed my eyes, and one little 9-year-old girl, something happened here with the 8-year-old, 9-year-old kids. Yeah. Raised their hand when I said, "Well, if you like for me to pray for you, if you don't know the Lord and the pardon of your sins, if you like for me to pray for you." So this one, my wife tapped me on the shoulder, and now I get all holy. I said, "Woman, leave me alone. Don't you see I'm doing what God has told me to do?" And she said, "Dwight, open your eyes." I opened my eyes, and this 9-year-old girl had raised her hand to come give her life to Christ. Come on, listen to me. Receive this, y'all. And so when I close my eyes and start to pray for her, I'm praying now. I'm like, "Hey, I heard the Lord. He's showing me a new thing." And then my wife taps me on the shoulder again. And by now, I'm really holy. "Woman, leave me alone. Don't you see I'm doing what God said to do?" She said, "Open your eyes." This time I opened my eyes, and more than 300 people had come in the middle of a gym floor at a cheer competition and gave their life to Christ, or asked us to pray for them and help lead them to Christ. This is the move of God taking place. This is the revival that we talk about. This is what was going on, and we didn't know. But if we had got off the train, where you mentioned earlier, 4 years wasn't a long time, 5 years wasn't a long time, 6 years was the time God wanted to do this new thing. And then we saw that many souls come to Christ. And right after that, people start coming up offering us buses. You don't hear me. They gave us buses, told me to come one day to pick from 3 buses. And so I was trying to pick one. They said, "No, take all 3 of those." Come on, baby. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You can't, no, never apologize for that.
No, never.
Because and this really is the heart of why we wanted to do this little co-op here. Is because, you know, the idea of a ministry misfit and a call of a mentor, both of those things are what you just heard. You've got this call of God in the middle of, in the middle of a jail cell. You've got this call of God as a wife who, those of you that don't know what I'm referring to, if you're listening to Call of a Mentor, hop on over to Ministry Misfits before listening to this, because we're gonna play that. Never mind. We may have already played these in Call of a Mentor. I forgot we had talked about doing this, but we talked about Dwight and Angela's testimonies a little bit, and one of the things that we heard about, or we didn't hear about because we weren't recording at the time, but Angela asked me, it's like, "Are you really sure you want mine? Because there's not much to it." But the fact that she, her conversion story of wanting to just be a godly woman in a godly life is what brought Dwight to the point of being able to actually listen in that jail cell.
That's exactly right.
And now we have a community seeing 300 cheerleading families coming to the Lord, and the fact that you haven't even gotten to this point, the prostitution is gone. The drugs are at least at a minimum.
Oh, yeah.
And now you don't even need the parents to turn the lights on, because you guys can hold your practices.
Yeah,
Come
we
on.
got lights.
We got, hey, when we go to the
lights.
city, we didn't have lights for all those years. We go to the city, they put in the things and gave us lights. I'm talking about like more than a couple $100,000 worth of lights were there. And somebody said, "We're going to put them up on the field at our request." And because of what y'all are doing in Ocean View.
And this is really what we're talking about here, is when you are actually willing to accept your call, whether that's to be a mentor or a coach or a pastor or whatever, when you are actually willing to accept your call, the those of you that have been listening to Mystery Misfits for a while know the verse that we wrap this around is 2 Timothy 4:5 with that last little section of fulfill your ministry. And we talked about this with Bradley when he was in the midst of, apartheid, in the midst of post-apartheid, trying to get his word out, but can't because he's got, a dark-skinned face on the flyer. We talked about this with Greg walking through why theology matters. We talked about with Greg why, how we actually define success. We talked about with Greg with why we believe sports is such a big key. I mean, you just heard again, we're going to keep saying this until we can't say anymore. Once again, the key to racial reconciliation in a community was sports ministry. Sports brought the kids in and brought them together, and then the gospel did the rest. These sort of things happen when we actually are willing to fulfill the call that God's placed on us, even when people tell us either we are not fit for ministry because of our past or because of our present or because of our future, or they tell us that what we are doing is not ministry to begin with. You guys are and in some ways the opposite. You were saying you weren't in ministry when you were.
Right.
That's exactly right.
But when you actually do what God has called you to do, and you allow it to be covered in prayer by yourselves and by your followers, and you have people that are willing to invest, because that was the word that kept coming back that you never actually said but described, both with Angie and those other women, was that they were fully invested into the vision that God had placed.
They were.
Yeah.
And you opened us up with Nehemiah, and that's what we see with Nehemiah, is that Nehemiah has this holy discontent for his city being in ruin. And he doesn't know what to do with it. And so he goes, and God just tells him to go and do it. He doesn't know what it looks like. He doesn't know how it's going to happen. And God starts dropping all these things in his lap. And right at the point where either he's about to fully commit or fully give up with the armies all surrounding him, they pick up both a sword and a hammer.
Yeah.
So that they can fight off the attacks while they rebuild. And that is the full extent of what it means to be invested in these kind of ministries.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, there's another side to this, because, my wife and I have tried to do similar things where, people just are not willing to invest because, they don't see the potential of some of these places. But you guys, the Hunkas that we've had on before, Lamont Hartman that we've had on, you guys are perfect examples of the fact that when you have people that are willing to invest in the vision that God has put on somebody, you can see massive transformation. And the other side of it is that it wasn't just you guys that were doing this, but that your willingness to be there and your heart for doing this brought multiple people that have been in this community for a while, that were pastors in this community. It brought them to the point of conviction to say, I need to be doing this too.
You just summed it up very well, brother. And maybe sometime we'll come back and bring them on, those pastors that.
Oh yeah, we're doing that.
We're going to invest in.
We'll definitely be doing that at some point. But that's what I believe. We are out of time for both shows now. Again,
my wife is getting a little worn down now, so I get.
Yeah. If those of you that are Mr. Misfits regulars, go check out A Call of a Mentor. It's one of our sister podcasts on Overwhelming Victory Radio. You'll hear more of this, the heart of both of these two individuals, them as a couple, them as individuals, them as a family. You'll hear more of what you just heard. Those of you that listen to A Call of a Mentor, this is the type of stuff we want to talk about regularly here on Mr. Misfits. We cover it from a wide variety of different areas. We cover the racial reconciliation stuff a lot. We talk a lot about community engagement, community change, cultural changes, and how the gospel is the key to doing all of it. If you want to support the McDowells, you can go to their website, Marriage Map. That's map with 2 P's, marriagemap.com. And there you'll have list one, how to contact them if you're interested in the marriage ministry, whether it's the therapy, the coaching, or the mentoring, which we talked about in episode 1 or episode 1 and 2 if you're on Call of a Mentor. It's all confusing, but you know where we're at. That you can get all the information there at their website. You can also listen to their show and get to their website from their slot on OV Radio at overwhelmingvictory.org. If you want to find out more about Ministry Misfits or support Ministry Misfits, you can do that at anchor.fm/Ministry Misfits. Click on the support button. Or if you want to do it for a tax credit, you can go to csrm.org/donate. Click on donate again, and then select Andrew Fouts from the drop-down menu. And that money not only goes to support the work of Ministry Misfits, and in some ways the Call of a Mentor through Overwhelming Victory Radio, but it also goes to support the wider work that both my family and the McDowell family are involved in within CSRM worldwide and domestically. So hopefully this has been beneficial. Let us know in the comments. Let us know with our ratings what you think, if we should do this more often. I have a feeling most of you are going to say yes, let's do this more often, because if nothing else, Dwight already said we're doing this more often, and he's chairman of the board, so I have to listen to him to keep my job. So we will see those of you with Call of Mentor, we will see you in 2 weeks. Those of you with Ministry Misfits, we will see you next week.
The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Overwhelming Victory Flicks, Overwhelming Victory Radio, and Ministry Misfits Media. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. Our music is provided by Morning Light Music and is titled Rain. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can support Ministry Misfits at anchor.fm/Ministry Misfits or for a 501c3 credit by going to csrm.org/donate and selecting Andrew Fouts in the campaign menu. To learn more about Overwhelming Victory or to listen to our sister podcast, visit overwhelmingvictory.org.